As you can see behind us, Tibetans in Dharamshala have come here to commemorate the 61st anniversary of 10th March Tibetan Uprising Day. 10th March is undoubtedly the most important day in the modern political history of Tibet, as that one black day changed the political landscape of the nation and poignantly marked the sacrifice of the Tibetan people, with thousands of them dying in the streets of Lhasa back in 1959.
Tenth of March for the Tibetans essentially is the awakening of the nation. We must remember when China invaded Tibet, most Tibetans were living individually as nomads and farmers. The idea of a nation, that we are a country with borders, government in the center in Lhasa, that political awareness was very little. People were hugely independent. They were living in so many different regions. So therefore, it took a long time for Tibetan people to gain that kind of political awakening.
The day is also seen as an important reminder to the new generation of Tibetans of their political identity and their initiation into the struggle. From a really young age, one of the most memorable things for me growing up as a Tibetan in exile, but also as a Tibetan growing up and living in the West, where you don't see as many Tibetans, one of the things that I remember made me feel the most Tibetan was March 10th. I remember from a very, very young age going to protests at the Chinese consulate and shouting "Free Tibet" slogans. And that was something that really played a big role in me trying to understand my identity as a Tibetan growing up in exile. And so I think it's a really important day for Tibetans in general, because it's the one day of the year where Tibetans all over the world are able to stand up and deliver a very unified message, and that message being Tibetans inside Tibet are still struggling for freedom and independence to this day. And as Tibetans living in exile, we have a lot of access to democratic tools, freedom, and so many different platforms. And so I think it's our responsibility to make sure we continue to work in solidarity with the Tibetans inside Tibet to get their message across. Despite a rich history of resistance against China since the occupation of Tibet, questions linger as to the collective complacency and stagnation of the Tibetan struggle from time to time.
In a freedom movement, there are ups and downs, especially a movement which has to face such an overwhelming, powerful opposition. Today, in our case, China. China, a country which is competing with United States to become a superpower in the world. So it's natural for Tibetans to feel little discouraged that it's not happening, that they are way too powerful. But intellectually, we need to have this understanding. Our fight is for the freedom of Tibet. Our fight is, we don't have to carry the extra burden of thinking that China is such a big, powerful country. Our goal is not to destroy China. We don't have to kill Chinese. Yeah? The strength of Tibetan freedom movement up until now has been the non-violent strategic movement that we have been maintaining for a long time. So if we don't carry that unnecessary burden of fearing China's military and economic power, then we can truly focus on what we actually have to do.
After more than 6 decades, the Tibetan diaspora that is now spread across various countries and across generations still have the aspiration for freedom and is sending out a strong message of restoring the Tibetan nation. So just like talking to our elders, talking to our Bobola and Mumlas and getting the stories from them, how different it was for them to grow up in a free and independent Tibet, and then during the invasion and then occupation and coming into exile, and then our parents who had to sort of grow up in India and Nepal, and then fast forward to people like us, me personally having to grow up in Canada. So I think it's changed quite a bit, but in the end I think the messaging is the same.
After all these years, I see that a lot of things have changed. And most importantly, for Tibetan people, we are so very aware of our situation and our rights, and also our weaknesses. Therefore, the sense of organization from within the Tibetan community has come to a level where I feel preparation for the nationhood is at much better pace, and therefore the confidence in me that Free Tibet is going to happen.